What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Brettel. Oof. Today, we're here to break down the Green Bay Packers' performance against the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday night with my four big things, four big takeaways from what we saw take place on the football field. But first, hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel, and you can find all my work over at Packers Wire. So, as I said, there's a lot to talk about coming off that game. Most of it not very good, but I wanted to boil it down to really my kind of four big things, four big takeaways for us to focus on coming off of that Monday night performance for the Packers. So let's start with the offense. If before the game you had told me the Packers hold Josh Jacobs to 3.3 yards, Devontae Adams has 4 catches for 45 yards, they force a turnover, the run game, while not great, finds a little bit more traction, a little bit more success than what it had been, I would have thought that the Green Bay Packers won this game. However, that was not the case. And ultimately, the reason why is the passing game. I don't know what the game plan was. Like, from the passing game perspective, I'm not sure what was trying to be accomplished. Matt LaFleur talks about the run or the pass game building off the run concepts. And we know that, or we've seen in the past where, there will be a play in the first quarter and then again in the third quarter that looks similar, but it's different to throw defenses off. Like, you're building towards something. I felt like it was just a bunch of random plays, again, from a passing game perspective, that were being thrown out there. This team has no identity on offense right now. Who can they lean on in that, must have situation? What core concept has been established, again, that they can lean on when things aren't going well? It also felt like like the game plan handcuffed Jordan Love to a degree. Like, he came into that game ranked top 5 in both pass attempts of 20 plus yards, pass attempts in the 10 to 19 yard range. But for a majority of 3 quarters, and especially that first half, it was a lot of plays closer to the line of scrimmage. Like, they weren't pushing the ball downfield. Now, is that because the offensive line got bullied against the Lions and now they're going up against Max Crosby, so they wanted some shorter, quicker throws for him to get the ball out of his hands and just try to build some positive momentum? Was it the game plan that they had in place for Aaron Jones, who ultimately didn't play, that where they wanted to get Jones the ball in those situations? Because when you're that close to game time, Matt LaFleur said that hamstring injury kind of reemerged on Saturday. Like, that's too close to the game for you to completely scrap the game plan. You got to kind of go in and you got to make adjustments, of course, and we'll talk about that more in a second, but you got to work with at least a shell that you constructed. So was Jones probably going to be a big factor in those type of play calls where, littered throughout the offensive game plan? Is it because Jordan Love, he has been inefficient on those deep ball attempts? Again, I'll talk about that here in a second as well. It could have been any number of those reasons that, we saw a lot more shorter pass plays from the Packers than what we have previously, and just not pushing the ball downfield as they had done through the first 4 games of the season. And with that, Love he was not in a rhythm. And again, because the Packers don't have an identity, they don't have anything to really lean on to get him into that rhythm. And like I said at the beginning, I'm not sure in the passing game what was trying to be accomplished. We can look back at the Detroit game, and no, it didn't end well, but the Packers are going up against a really good defensive front. They've struggled to run the ball. If there's a part of that Detroit defense you want to try to challenge, it's going to be the cornerbacks. And so, and they had been dealing with some injuries there as well. Detroit had. And so Green Bay came out the game, 6 straight passes. Like, it obviously didn't work out, but at least from a thought process perspective, you could see, why the Packers were trying to do something, the reasoning behind it. And again, it didn't work out, but you can see what was going into those decisions. The passing game against the Raiders, like I said, I'm not sure what was happening. The pre-snap motion, which is such a core part of this Matt LaFleur offense, they're doing it, but it feels almost like doing it for the sake of doing it rather than, oh, the defense is tipping its hand, or it's keeping them off balance. What motion is meant to do. Matt LaFleur and the offense also didn't do a very good job of getting the playmakers the ball. He said after the Detroit game, they have to be better about doing that, being more concerted in doing so. And even if that means, scheming up specific plays to get those guys the ball. But Patrick Taylor finished with more targets than Romeo Doubs. He had more targets at halftime than Watson and Doubs combined. Christian Watson seemed to be only targeted on vertical plays, downfield pass attempts. And yes, he brings that ability, but if he's going to be your number one, and Matt LaFleur's talked about his versatility, how he can step into any of the 3 wide receiver roles on the offense and take on any of those responsibilities, like to truly maximize that speed and maximize what he can bring to this offense, you got to use him in a greater variety of ways, or get him the ball when he's doing those other things. It can't just be that vertical threat. Luke Musgrave, he had 7 targets, which is fantastic. However, his longest play was 8 yards. All of those targets were within, 5-6 yards of the line of scrimmage. Just again, goes back to kind of that conservative game plan approach, which again, they're going up against the Raiders secondary that's given up 340 passing yards per game this season. They had 2 cornerbacks that were injured. Like, the opportunity was there for this Packers offense to try to find some success through the air. And again, this is not all on Matt LaFleur. The Jordan Love, the pass catchers, and the execution on the field was certainly off as well. It's coach speak, it sounds like, when Matt LaFleur comes up to the podium and says all 11 of the players have to be better. They have to be on the same page. I got to do a better job as a play caller. But it's 100% true for the Green Bay Packers. Like, there is no one thing that they do really well. And so to raise that current floor that they have, it's collectively going to take all 11 players doing at least even just a little bit better than what they're doing. And collectively, if all of that can happen on the same play, hopefully you see the results from it. During the New Orleans game, during the Lions game, when the offense did find some success, they were in their 2-minute mode. They were in hurry up. We didn't see the Packers fall back to that against the Raiders during that game. And there were times where they went away from what was working. They were running really well, I should say, between the tackles. But we saw Matt LaFleur try to almost overthink to a degree, what he's trying to accomplish and what he's asking his offensive players to do. Like, this is an offense that right now is struggling to execute. And so when you introduce the run or Christian Watson, where he gets the ball behind the line of scrimmage, like, in order for that play to be executed properly and to work out, you need 6, 7, 8 blocks to go perfect. And this is a team right now that, as we saw in that play, they can't do that. They can't execute on that right now. There was another run play where Patrick Taylor got the ball and Tucker Kraft was asked to come up from the left side, from the offensive perspective, the left side of the formation, across to block Max Crosby. No, you cannot do that. In sports, not just football, but I think in sports in general, when things are going wrong, you got to go back to the basics. What's the core? What's your core competencies? What can you hopefully try to lean on? I feel like during this bye week, that's what this offense has to do. What is at the core of the Matt LaFleur offense? What is it that it wants to accomplish from play to play, from series to series, so it builds upon itself? And that's what this Green Bay Packers team offense needs to go back to. What is it that they want to accomplish at its core? And then hammer that. Do those little things. Do the details. Get the details right. Get the precision on point and execute that aspect of it. And then from there, you can start building off of it. I feel like they just need to a degree, hit the reset button and go back to, all right, what's the basics? What's the fundamentals of making this Matt LaFleur offense go? So there's just kind of my general thoughts on what the heck we saw from the offense, specifically the passing game, because the article that I wrote over at Packers Wire, in the title, I used the word disjointed, because that's honestly, and to try to sum it up, the best way, the bow that I can put on what we saw from them. Another topic, as I mentioned earlier, Aaron Jones was expected to play up until Saturday, during Saturday's practice, when the team goes from in the Don Hutson Center to outside on the practice field. He did not go with them. Matt LaFleur said after practice, he eventually caught up and had his normal workload that he had previously throughout the week. But then following Monday's game, he said something with that hamstring popped up during that Saturday practice, and ultimately he couldn't go. On the ESPN broadcast, Troy Aikman said that Matt LaFleur was, and I believe his word was, exasperated when he found out that Jones could not go in that game. And like I said earlier, if the injury pops up Saturday, maybe Sunday, Monday morning, whenever it is, and they officially rule him out that he can't go, that's too close to game time to, just scrap the game plan and build something new. You gotta, to a degree, go with what you have and make adjustments along the way. And those adjustments are an area where this offense is struggling, and that falls on coaching, but it's also, I think, the youth and experience that this group has. I think part of the reason why Patrick Taylor had, more targets than Dobbs, more targets than Watson and Dobbs in the first half is because those were plays meant for Aaron Jones. And like I said, it sounds like, and I'm guessing because Aaron Jones is, he's the straw that stirs the drink in this Packers offense, that Matt LaFleur wanted him to have a heavy emphasis in this game. So I'm guessing that those plays that Taylor got were designed for Aaron Jones, and there were others in there as well. But going back to the adjustments, we see this team make adjustments. They're one of the best third quarter offenses in football. They come out at halftime, and they did it this week too. They put points up on the board, but you can't wait that long. That's too far gone in the game. In the Saints game, by the time the third quarter started, you're down 3 scores. The Lions game, in the third quarter, you're down 3 scores. The Raiders game, if the Raiders are actually able to take advantage of the Packers' mistakes on offense, like the Packers are down 3 scores going into the third quarter. Like, you cannot wait that long. So again, that's on coaching, but I think part of it as well is the youth, the inexperience on this team. We were talking to Jordan Love last Thursday, and he mentioned that it can be tough to make in-game adjustments, and the pass catchers in particular, are having issues, and that's my words, not his, are having issues with the unscouted looks that they see. And a lot of young receivers have issues with the physicality that can come, when defenses are playing up close to line of scrimmage, when they're challenging them. And so that those just being more comfortable with new unscouted looks that you get, like, that's experience. You just have to go out there and see a variety of looks, know what the defense is going to do, and know how you're going to react to that. Like, to a degree, there's only so much from an adjustment standpoint, because it is brand new to them in the heat of the moment, that can be done. So I think that's an aspect of this as well that's contributing to the lack of untimely adjustments that we see. But again, at the end of the day, and I feel like Matt LaFleur would say this as well, it's not an excuse either. Like, you got to go out there and perform. And right now, the first half for the Packers in these last 3 games has been just absolutely abysmal. They have struggled mightily, to put it mildly. All right, next topic, deep ball issues. I alluded to this earlier. We didn't see a ton of that early on from Jordan Love in this game. And one of the reasons that could be is because he's been really, really inefficient. So perhaps Matt LaFleur said, hey, let's dial it back. Let's try to take some of the shorter throws. Let's try to progress our way down the field rather than just relying on the home run ball. One of the reasons that Love's been taking those shots is his willingness to do so. I mean, he has said he likes to throw the ball. He likes to push the ball downfield. Also, that's what defenses have been daring this team to do. They've been crowding the line of scrimmage. They've been playing a lot of cover one to try to take the run, muddy things up underneath. And so, from a probability standpoint, that's where the opportunity is. So those have been 2 key factors in why the Packers have been pushing the ball downfield. And while Love, like I said, ranks is towards the top of the list in terms of attempts on those types of passes, he ranks 31st in completion percentage on passes of 20 plus yards. He ranks 22nd in completion percentage on passes of 10 to 19 yards. He's completed just 6 of 24 of his passes of 20 plus yards. And only 5 of those, not 5 of the 6, but 5 of the 24, this is a Pro Football Focus number, have been deemed catchable, which is the worst in football. We have focused a lot on the run game, and understandably so, is a big contributor to the offense's issues, and that's 100% true. They fall behind the sticks, puts them in obvious passing situations, defense up front pins its ears back, defense gets into favorable matchups. We've talked about this. But following this game, I was thinking back to last season. And in week 10 is when, that was a big Christian Watson game. And from there, the offense started to take off. The 9 weeks prior, there were a ton of injuries along the offensive line. Felt like weekly the Packers were playing musical chairs, moving guys around, taking guys in and out as they dealt with injuries. And yeah, that affected the run game, but they also had Watson injured during that time. Dobbs missed some time as well. You know, they didn't have the speed, the speed I should say that they have at this time on offense. And the Packers really, really struggled to push the ball downfield, just like they are now. There's more of a willingness to do so now, but in terms of connecting on it, they're struggling mightily, as these numbers show. So last season, what did defenses do? They shrunk the field. They condensed things. They played closer to the line of scrimmage. And right now, you have a Packers team that can't run the ball efficiently. You have a Packers team that can't push the ball downfield. There's literally nothing for defenses to fear right now. And so by shrinking the field, they're taking away things over the middle. They're taking away things underneath. There's just more bodies. There's less space. It's difficult for players to get open. And from a schematic standpoint, in terms of what Matt LaFleur can draw up, like when you're kind of in the predicament that the Packers are right now, there's only so much that he can do with what defenses are throwing at them. So, and to break free of that, they got to start connecting on some of those shot plays. You do that a few times, you do that somewhat consistently, relatively consistently in terms of the odds of hitting these deeper shots. The defense is going to start to back off. It's going to create better spacing. There's going to be obviously big playability to Watson or Musgrave or Reed, whoever you're giving the ball to. But with better spacing, that's going to help the run game. There's going to be less guys near the line of scrimmage. It's going to help the underneath routes, the over the middle, where we know Jordan Love in this offense wants to go with the ball. It's going to create opportunities for all the other skill position players within that offense. So it's going to be really, really important if things are going to improve on this offense, they got to start hitting on some of those downfield shots, force the defense to respect it. And again, the trickle-down effect, all of football is intertwined, it's connected. That's going to really, really help every other position within the offense. And these last 2 weeks in particular, obviously offensive line got just bullied against the Lions. Max Crosby had a really, really good game against the Packers. And overall, outside of Crosby, of course, that Raiders defensive front, not daunting by any means, but I thought that they had a solid game, a solid performance against the Green Bay Packers. And, the pass protection has not been anywhere near as stout as it had been early on. And as we look at Jordan Love throwing interceptions and, him taking a step backwards over these last few weeks, that's absolutely a contributor to this. I mean, the first 2 games, he had 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had all the time in the world back there. He could, and one of the things going back to training camp and early on in the season that I was really impressed with was, for a young player from an experience standpoint, his ability to know when to push the ball downfield, when to try to fit it into a tight window, and when to take what the defense was giving him, go through his progressions, and just take what was there. And that's a big reason why we didn't see any interceptions early on. And a product of that is having time in the pocket to do so. You're not rushed. You know that you don't have to try to fit a ball into a tight window because you can wait for something to come open. And then from the receiver's perspective, if they're going against unscouted looks or opponents are playing them more physical, that's extra time for them to find a window to get open. But now, these last 2 weeks in particular, that time hasn't been there as much. And so I think there's instances where we're seeing, Love be a little bit rushed, not sure if the offensive line's going to hold up. So he's trying to force the ball into a tight window, maybe taking something that he shouldn't. And several of those downfield throws against the Raiders, they didn't feel like in other games where, he had time, surveyed the field, and then decided that's where he wanted to go with the ball. A lot of those downfield throws just kind of reeked of desperation, like a quarterback who is, they're trailing in the game, the offense is struggling, they need a spark, he's getting a little impatient. Let's just see if we can, connect on one. That's what it felt like in this game compared to the previous games where we've seen the Packers push the ball. And again, it starts up front, the pass protection, the offensive line, and they've, Zach Tom, he's had some really tough assignments the last 2 weeks, Aiden Hutchinson, Max Crosby. But again, if we're going to see this offense start to find some sort of consistency, find something that they can hang on to. We need to see the offensive line play trend back towards the direction that it was early on in the season. All right, last one, the defense. Like I said at the beginning, they wasn't always pretty, but at the end of the day, the defense, they did their job. They held up their end of the bargain. They held Josh Jacobs to 3.3 yards. Davante Adams had just 4 receptions for 45 yards. They had some key third down sacks, forced a turnover, and of the 17 points, only 14 were really their fault. The field goal, and it was a great job on their part that they gave up after a turnover. The Raiders were deep in Packers territory at that time. The Matt LaFleur talked about after the Detroit game, there needed to be a philosophical change defensively, and not being so rigid and sticking to that cover 2 shell that patented cover 2 shell that Joe Barry wants to play with. And we saw, at least for this week, those changes take place. In part, the Packers were able to stop the run. 1, Raiders just haven't been that good at it. We'll admit that. But 2, there were definitely more players around the line of scrimmage. I'm not going to say that this was an aggressive Packers defense, but it was definitely a less passive approach than what we've seen previously. More defenders were near the line of scrimmage to help against the run. The cornerbacks were up at the line of scrimmage, challenging the receivers more. And those extra defenders near the line of scrimmage, like I said, that helps the run. But Jimmy Garoppolo loves to attack the middle of the field, loves to throw those shorter underneath routes. And again, when you got more guys, just like we talked about from the Packers' perspective on offense, we got more guys closer to the line of scrimmage. It takes those opportunities away. It muddies things up over the middle of the field. As far as Davante Adams, we saw them deploy a similar strategy that they used in Week 17 last season against Justin Jefferson, because Jair was not on Davante all that much. But whatever side of the field Davante went to, the cornerback was obviously there, and then the safety was shadowed over right over the top, essentially a double team coverage on Davante Adams. And it worked for the most part. They were able to, if you hold Davante Adams to under 50 receiving yards, you've done your job for the day. That's about as good as you can get in that regard. Now, with that said, certainly areas for improvement. The pressure was not steady enough. Jimmy Garoppolo from Pro Football Focus was pressured on 25% of his dropbacks. For some context, if that number was over the course of the season so far, that would rank 33rd among all quarterbacks. The Packers just did not get there consistently enough. Go back and watch the games, especially in that second half. There were a lot of pass attempts for Garoppolo where he, just had time in the pocket. And the Packers even sent some blitzers. Like we had a linebacker blitz, there was a Darnell Savage blitz, but they just didn't get home. And as a whole this season, the Packers have not been all that effective when trying to blitz the quarterback. So they had some key third down sacks, which was a product of stopping the run. I wrote last week that I think one of the reasons why the edge rusher room, except for Rashawn Gary, who's been exceptional, has struggled to consistently get after the quarterback is because they're struggling against the run. When the offense is in second and short, third and short situations, the defense can't just fully pin its ears back and go from point A to point B to get the quarterback. They got to defend the run too. It takes a little bit of the bite away from the pass rush in those instances. The Packers have also faced a lot of quarterbacks who do a good job of getting the ball out of their hands quickly. And of course, from a pass rush perspective, that's going to impact your time to get to the quarterback. So they just struggled to get after Jimmy Garoppolo consistently, and again had some big moments, a product of stopping the run on early downs where they were able to get after him on third downs, but overall just weren't able to get after him enough. Slants and screens in the passing game for the Raiders, that was able to give this defense fits. There were some personnel issues. We all saw Preston Smith lined up on Davante Adams. Rudy Ford and Darnell Savage were really backed off. When the Raiders were in a goal-to-go situation, they hit the slant for the touchdown. So definitely, absolutely still some things to clean up. One of the Raiders scoring drive, I believe, was 8 minutes, 14 plays. Like, they converted some key third downs on each of their scoring drives. Like, again, this was far from a perfect performance, but the defense took what it did against the Lions, made some adjustments. The players performed better. And ultimately, this is a results-based business. They contained Josh Jacobs. They didn't let Davante Adams dominate, and they gave up just 14 points. The defense held up its end of the bargain. The offense now, they're going to have to take this bye week and, you know, take some of their own advice, that Matt LaFleur gave. Philosophically, take a look back at what the offense is trying to accomplish. What do they want to do? Like I said, go back to the basics, because what's taking place right now, as we've seen, is not working. This unit is going backwards rather than progressing. So there you have it, my friends. Those are my key items, big things, big takeaways from the Green Bay Packers performance against the Las Vegas Raiders. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel, and you can find all my work over at Packers Wire. So until next time, friends, take care, stay safe, and as always, go Pack Go.